Welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. This episode is brought to you by Lakestar, one of the leading European venture capital firms. Lakestar's mission is to find, fund, and grow disruptive businesses that are enabled by technology and founded by exceptional entrepreneurs in Europe and beyond. Founded by Klaus Ammels, the team's early investments include Skype, Spotify, Facebook, and Airbnb. And since raising its first fund in 2012, Lakestar now manages an aggregated volume of over 2.8 billion euros across their early and growth stage funds. The team actively advises and supports portfolio companies in marketing, recruitment, technology, product development, and regulatory insight, accompanying founders from seed to early stage, growth stage, or exit. Lakestar's games and media team has made 18 investments, including 1047 Games, Zebedee, Modulate, and Trace. If you're interested in learning more or getting in contact with the Lakestar team, simply go to lakestar.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Niko Vuori. Today, we are talking to one of the busiest Web3 players in the entire ecosystem, with a ton of initiatives in the works and a finger in many, many pies. We are talking about Mythical Games, creators of licensed mobile football game NFL Rivals, which crossed 1 million downloads just a couple of months after its launch earlier this year, as well as Blanko's Block Party, a multiplayer universe available on the Epic Games Store. In addition, Mythical operates the Mythos Foundation, on which it partners with other traditional game developers, other Web3 developers, and esports and guild operators. And they also operate their own Mythical platform, through which Mythical publishes third-party developer games. And I'm getting out of breath just talking about all these things. There's also the Myth token and the small matter of about $300 million that they've raised in venture funding over the past couple of years, including a recent $37 million Series C extension that was announced just a few weeks ago in late June of this year. So Mythical clearly has a lot going on in both the Web2 and the Web3 spaces, and a lot of bets across its own initiatives, across third-party partner initiatives, and across multiple platforms and form factors. And so to discuss Mythical's strategy, plans going forward, tactics, and to talk more about how all of these various bets are working out, I'm very excited to invite to the pod today Mythical's founder and CEO, John Linden. John is a longtime gaming veteran, entrepreneur. He has an incredibly experienced team, which of course goes a long way to explaining his success in fundraising, as well as attracting numerous top-tier partners across the various initiatives. So with that little introduction, John, welcome to the pod. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So with guests like yourself, longtime listeners will know I always like to start with the kind of journey into Web3. Tell us a little bit about your background in games. You have a very long, very distinguished career in gaming, mostly Web2, traditional gaming, but some huge franchises in the mix there. Love to talk a little bit about those. Just give us your background. And then I really, and our listeners really like to hear, what was the journey into Web3? What was the aha moment that caused you to go after Mythical and the opportunities that you're pursuing right now?
Yeah, well, that's a lot to answer there for sure. Been in gaming for a while, so I've been very fortunate in my career to see several different flavors of gaming, and I think from there, you start seeing a little bit of pattern recognition, which is great. But it really started my career in gaming at Activision Blizzard. So obviously they've been in the news quite a bit, and hopefully they get their deal done here. But it's great to really kind of got that start there. So really started in more the traditional PC console business. My first game was a game called Call of Duty. So I got thrown right into the Call of Duty franchise as one of the studio leads. There's 5 game studios there. So we focused a lot on multiplayer and did some of the other initiatives around Call of Duty as well. So we did some multiplayer stuff. We did a lot of mobile type pieces. We did a thing called Clan Wars for many years. So it was really kind of fun to be able to, kind of start your career with a big title like that. Now, obviously there's a lot, we kind of cut our teeth on that. big annual releases, a lot of pressure to get that game out. But we really got to see a lot of the inner workings of the gaming industry very quickly, And so it was on that franchise for I shipped 4 Call of Duties. Was there for about 5 years, and really kind of became obsessed with mobile, which is what I thought next. Mobile was a growing industry. We asked Bobby every year, when can we get into mobile? When can we get into mobile? And his answer was generally, it's not big enough yet. I'm like, well, it's a $40 billion industry. He's like, it's not big enough yet. And so there's a kind of this, there's a group undercurrent at Activision, and we just kind of started building our own mobile stuff a little bit to just test it out. And so worked on a game called Skylanders Battlecast, which was really one of the first augmented reality games. We used physical trading cards and all that to kind of make these cards. We sold packs in the stores, which is where Skylanders toys were generally sold. So we did, kind of physical cards that became digital assets, which was really interesting. And it kind of sparked that interest around digital assets and what, this whole physical to digital type world. And, shortly after that game came out, Activision decided it's time for mobile. They ended up buying King, and kind of the mobile strategy for Activision became pretty much Candy Crush. That was a big portion of it. Now, obviously, they've released a lot more since then, but ended up leaving there to kind of follow mobile further. So left in 2016, started a game, kind of merged with the company, and we created a company called Seismic Games. We did a game there called Marvel Strike Force in mobile, which ended up being a top 25 game for many years. So we got very, very fortunate that our paths in mobile, we hit some big success there too. We did another game with Wizards of the Coast. We did the Magic the Gathering game. We did a Jeopardy game. You could voice recognition Jeopardy. You could play along with like the Apple TV and things like that. So we got to experiment a lot of things. And then fortunately for us, the Niantic came and kind of bought that company only after 2 years after we had kind of really gotten into the heat of it. And so 2018 came along, and was really starting to think of what comes next. And I think we had seen a lot of trends happening in gaming. We had seen things that we had been frustrated with our careers, and really thought things about digital ownership and tradable secondary economies and all that. We really believe that was the future. So I ended up kind of leaving the Niantic deal. I stayed on as an advisor for a little bit, but we started very early in this space. I don't think we came at it for blockchain games or Web3. We came at it just thinking about how that technology could be used to solve a lot of these challenges we've seen in gaming. That was kind of the initial path in. I think for us, we started seeing a lot of really interesting things happening. I think the biggest moment for me, I was a game maker, and we would, I'd spend $30 or $40 in free to play games, mostly to support developers more than anything. I wasn't ever considered a whale. And then next thing I know, that these little things called CryptoKitties came out, and I bought like $600 of 2D images of cats, and I'm like, what just happened here? Because this is not my normal behavior. And I think, to me, that's really what kind of started to spark that digital asset concept. It's just like, wow. For me, it was cool. It was fun. The whole idea of smart contracts and you could program these things or whatever, that was really appealing. But more importantly to me was more around, this is a shift in consumer behavior, right? Yeah. Like, it's no longer just buying digital entertainment. I can decide what to do. I can decide. I have the decision as a consumer on what do I do with these digital assets. And I think that was really the piece that kind of hooked us right away.
Yeah, and this is why I love doing this question for folks such as yourself, who have a long career in gaming. You've seen a lot, you've done a lot. I made some notes here. Obviously, you studied up in your past before this episode, but we game makers have a lot in common. Call of Duty is a game that I never worked on. I wish I had, but I'm still to this day addicted to it. I love that game for console. Everybody has their own favorite games across different platforms, and we're going to get to this question in a second here. In fact, my very next question, which is, as game makers, as gamers, we recognize different patterns across different platforms, across different technologies, and I think that the journey that you've had into the digital ownership piece in Web3 is very similar to mine, for sure. CryptoKitties also was the very first, where it's like hundreds of dollars. I'm like, what am I doing here? But it was I didn't regret it for 1 second. It was more of a, this is really interesting. We're tapping into something here as game developers and as gamers. And so I love to hear that journey. And it is that aha moment that really clicks, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to speak for you here, but I feel like that's that moment where it's like, oh, yeah, this is a different way of playing this game. This is a different way of being part of this ecosystem, this community, this franchise, this IP. It's a different way of engaging.
That's exactly right. We've seen dozens of things in gaming that felt broken a little bit. To me, what's really interesting is watching the esports kind of industry kind of grow up. we got to be very involved with a lot of the early, Call of Duty, live streamers and groups like Optic Gaming back in the day, and now, 100 Thieves and all these different groups that have emerged from that. And what was really interesting is a lot of them struggled, right? Because they were very, very influential. Streamers and brands getting involved in all these groups. They're very influential in gaming, but they weren't really part of the economy. They were monetizing on YouTube or Twitch or sponsorships or whatever. And to me, we just kind of looked at it and said, man, it seems like it's time to bring them into the game economies, right? How do we do that? We even saw this stuff. I won't name names on it, but with Call of Duty, I know there was a brand partnership at one point, big brand IP, and they wanted to do kind of these soldiers in Call of Duty, and we just couldn't figure out the pricing because they thought that their IP was worth more than our IP, right? And to me, it started sitting back saying, we thought of these problems for a while, like, man, it feels like there needs to be almost a business development layer, right? Something that creators can tap into, that players can tap into, that esports and all these groups can kind of democratize these game economies and be part of these worlds that people are spending more and more and more and more time in. So that was really kind of the thesis. And then when that crypto case came along, you're just kind of like, this might be the tech for it, right? And I think that the downside at the time was, I still probably to this day, there's certain times you'll send an Ethereum transaction to somebody, you kind of hold your breath for 30 seconds and hope it freaking shows up, right? So it's still been, I still say it's still pretty early. Even now, I mean, people have said this for years, and it still feels pretty early. I think that's one of the challenges we've thought about too, is that, you talk to groups like Nintendo, right? And they're such an amazing group to work with, but they're kind of like, yeah, I don't like these private key things. Gamers lose their password all the time. And I don't know if they're going to know the significance of, if I set this private key down, I'm going to lose Zelda, right? So there's still a lot of things I think we have to address. I think it's getting better, but we're still a little ways out, and I think we're what I think I'm most fascinated about, and I think why it takes a little bit longer with this is not a new platform, right? This is a new paradigm, right? So it affects everything. And I think that's it's the exciting part. It's also, the scary part a little bit. It takes time. It takes policy change. It takes integration. It takes education. And it takes a lot of technology behind the scenes to do it well. So,
yeah. And you know what else it also takes? It takes a lot of shots on goal to figure it out. And that's actually perfect segue. We couldn't have planned this any better into the next question, which is, you've got a lot of different things going on. Obviously, you raised a lot of funding. We'll get to that question later on in the episode here. But I think one of the most interesting things to me, as a studio, as a developer, as a company, as a business, you guys are working on mobile with NFL Rivals and the app stores, and kind of hopefully co-developing some of the policies that are shifting, that are improving all the time, in my opinion. You've got Blanko's Block Party, Epic Games Store, totally different form factor, arguably borderline game, or metaverse play, or IP play. Like, there's a lot of interesting things going on there. You've got the publisher arrangements and partnerships that you guys are working on. You have your own token. You have the foundation. So you've got a lot of things going on, just like I mentioned in the intro. And yes, it takes a lot of shots on goal. I'm very curious to hear, when you have a paradigm shift, like I think both of us agree, and a lot of our listeners agree with Web3. So how do these all fit together? What is kind of your strategy as you are taking these shots on goal, as you are experimenting, as you're trying different things? Many of these they're not cheap, right? Like NFL Rivals, you've got the NFL license, right? And I know from experience working with licensed IP is difficult. Blanko's, you're building IP. It's an IP play from scratch. That's also really hard to do, right? And to do both of those at the same time is arguably even harder. And then you've got the whole piece around the Myth token and the economics around that, the tokenomics around that, the legal side of that as well. So very, very curious to hear, at the risk of creating a very long question, I'd love to hear how you are thinking about all these different plays, how they come together, and what's the through line through it all.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things you have to be very careful in this space, especially when we started in 2018. It was like green pastures, right? You just kind of come in from the space and you're just like, oh my God, there's so much we could do. And I think for us, we tried to stay very focused. We've had some, we kind of, one of our core goals and our kind of principles here at Mythical is we call ourselves, one of our things is we are pathfinders, right? And I think that's something we try and instill in everything we do here, is that, man, and we talk to the team about this all the time, is like, there's not really, something we can compare it against because it hasn't happened before. And I think that's exciting. It's scary, it takes a lot of effort to kind of do that. So I think we're not trying not to boil the ocean, but we're trying to add a series of tasks that do expand on each other. Right. And I think that's the key. And frankly, I think we have spent some of that time of building. I mean, even the blockchain choices we made in 2018 are different than what we're making now. So there's definitely been some learnings and some I wouldn't say missteps, but some brick walls you start to hit a little bit. But I think for us, we're really trying to keep it fairly focused. So, for example, we didn't build a platform right away, right? We've come at this at an angle of almost a studio model to start with, right? So we started off with Blankos. We've added Nitro Nation, which is actually going beta today, which is exciting. It's actually going to go probably worldwide in the app stores about a week from now, and you'll start seeing that game a lot more. We have a game in racing. We have a game in sports. We have a game, sandbox style game, right, with Blankos, or a party game. And the reason we kind of went that direction is we have built a lot of tech. We've kind of built our own chain tech. But again, we did that somewhat out of a necessity, to basically blend those app store relationships and be completely compliant with the app stores and take fiat money from gamers that don't understand blockchain necessarily. There wasn't a solution out there, so we kind of adopted our own. Frankly, same thing with marketplace tech. I mean, there's been a lot of marketplaces out there, but one thing that we've learned and we kind of understood a little bit before is that gamers are not crypto traders. They're just not. They're not financial traders. They're consumers, right? They think in terms of liquidity. They think in terms of fun. They don't think in terms of like bids and floors and all the words that you kind of find out in the crypto space. Win moon is not necessarily in a gamer vocabulary, right? It's really about, hey, I got 5 race cars. I want $100 US for them thing, and make that happen, right? So we've kind of built some of this out of necessity, but I'd say we really have kind of 2 main products at the end of the day. And one kind of newer product that we'll be introducing a lot more. And we've shown a little bit around the streaming, and I'll explain that a little later why we're thinking about that. But the main 2 products we have is we have kind of our own blockchain tech. At the end of the day, though, it's built on an EVM tech stack, right? So it's basically an EVM chain. On top of that, we've written a couple systems to make it fully compliant with Apple and Google, with Xbox, with PlayStation, with things like that. So really, that's a product we have, the Mythical chain, or the Mythos chain, we're kind of now calling it. And then we have the marketplace tech. And the marketplace tech is really, really built around concepts like liquidity and making it very simple for consumers to come in and out, and bringing that into the game itself, bringing that marketplace experience into that Web2 kind of feel, right? So that's been the main 2 products we've really focused on behind the scenes. And then on top of that, we have a couple games. Now, each of these games, Blankos, we had a developer that helped us, right? So we had a group called Third Kind Games out of the UK. They were the primary developer of Blankos. We bought a studio that became NFL Rivals. So that was an internal studio, small team though, 8 or 9 people, amazing team out of Brighton. So we acquired that team, kind of acqui-hired that team to build that. And then Nitro Nation is actually a second party deal, right? So it's a group called CM Games out of Estonia. They have an existing franchise called Nitro Nation. They know how to make these racing titles. They've made 5 or 6 of them at this point. So the idea of trying to recreate everything, if we were trying to recreate a racing title with a brand new studio on Web3, there's no way we could pull that off. So we're trying to be the experts around that Web3 side, and we're really finding companies that know what they're doing to partner with us in various fashions to help get these games out the door. So that's one way we've managed that. The foundation side and the token side, we were pretty late on that. We were trying to hold off. Our big view is like, we didn't want to have a speculative token. We never want to have a speculative token. We've never marketed this token, right? We wanted to help get a foundation off the ground, that there was a token attached, that anybody that wanted to adopt that token could adopt it. And that's how we set out with Mythos Foundation. So we don't own the token. We don't own the foundation. We just kind of help to get it off the ground. And it has its own special counsel. There's 23 companies now around the world that are part of that foundation. There's proposals coming in now from third-party independent studios. It's really cool to kind of see that take off. So we did a lot of work to help kind of get it out there and get those connections started. But it's kind of taken a life of its own, and it's not something we own.
So I had it coming because I asked a big question, got a big answer. I love it. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to start with, with the gaming lens. The titles obviously got to stand for themselves. It's great to build technology and a platform play to enable a lot of experiences in the future. But obviously, the experiences themselves obviously need to stand on their own 2 feet and actually be successful products in and of themselves. And then that's how the flywheel gets going. So why don't we start with Blankos, because that was your first title. I actually didn't know that you had another studio that helped you develop it out of the UK. So that's news to me. Here's what I do know. I know it generated a lot of excitement. You had a million plus pre-registrations before it was even live. And it's been out for, I believe, just under a year, at least in full launch, probably a bit more than that, and kind of with beta and private launch. How has it been performing? Well, let's start with two questions here. Question number one: what was the goal with Blankos? Right.
Yep.
As an experienced game developer, to me, Blanko strikes as yes, it's party play, but it's less game, more kind of metaverse, right? And to me feels more like an IP play. You can absolutely push back on any of these characterizations, by the way, when it comes to it. And then the second piece is how has it performed in terms of your expectations up until this point, and what have you learned as you're then working on different titles? And then we'll shift gears onto other titles.
Yeah, Blankos obviously has a very special place in our heart because it was definitely our champion of first, right? That game, Jamie Jackson, our co-founder, really had the concept of this game. He was literally, we were kind of talking about blockchain and marketplace and all that. And he's our creative director. He's been in the game. He was another studio head at Activision Blizzard. And I remember he was in like my gazebo in the backyard when we first started, just sketching something. And that basically became Billy Bones. And so the idea behind Blankos was really, we wanted something that was pop culture, that we could really drive into a lot of content. I mean, to be real honest, the game kind of shifted a few times. The reason they're called Blankos is the initial idea was they were going to start as blank silhouettes, right? And anybody could kind of take that and resell it. And basically the idea behind that, and the reason we got into vinyl toys is one, we're kind of vinyl toy nerds ourselves. We love that audience. We love the artist community there. The kid robots and all of these amazing things that have kind of predated that game were really great. But the thing we found really interesting about that is the physical figurine, the actual vinyl toys themselves. How that industry started is they started very similar. They started with blank silhouettes, right? Couple kid robot silhouettes. Artists would take those blank silhouettes, they would paint them, they would build their own community, and they would resell them to their community, right? And we thought, what a perfect kind of analogy to what we want to try and do digitally, right? So that was kind of the reason behind Blankos. It did kind of take a life of its own. I'd say we definitely learned a lot from that game. I think we definitely had some challenges between hardcore gameplay and social and all that. And we struggled a little bit with that. I still think we're struggling a little bit with that. The other challenge we had with that game is that game was originally going to be made for mobile. And we went to Apple and Google in 2018, 2019, and they're just like, not happening. So we're like, well, crap. Why don't we go to PC? Because then we can kind of call the shots at least. And we've had a nice run with that. We're definitely not done with the Blankos IP, where you're going to see some new stuff from us. We'll probably announce fairly soon here some new things there. We're definitely wanting to kind of reinvest behind that IP because that was one of the things, it's really interesting, Niko, is I've been in the industry for a while, and it's very hard for East to meet West in any game title. We tried it at Skylanders, we tried it at Call of Duty. Taking a Western IP and taking it East is nearly impossible. We've had a weird thing with Blankos, though, to where it's kind of globally accepted. So we really found some amazing pieces there. In fact, one of our early board members was the CEO of Sanrio, Hello Kitty. So he knew a lot about the space, and he's kind of helped guide us a little bit. But he gave us one of the best compliments I think we've had on building a new IP. Is he said, you could put Blankos up on a shelf next to Kid Robot, next to Hello Kitty, next to anything else, and they already have they have an aesthetic. You can tell which one's a Blanko, and that was really cool for us. So we love that IP. We've had some challenges with that game though. So it's actually monetized quite well. The lifetime value per customer is strong. The players that come in and spend money are spending good value there. I think the challenges have really been a couple. One, it's now kind of what I consider built on older tech on the marketplace. And we want to move that to the new marketplace tech that we've been building over the last 18 months. So we got a little bit of work to move it over to the new system. But the biggest challenge for us, honestly, has been cost of acquisition. To really get that game to 30, 40, 50 million players, which is what our goal is. We want to get it there. We want to get a massive amount of players behind that game because that IP has a life of its own, right? We've had so many toy manufacturers reach out about making physical product. We've had, streaming services reach out about TV stuff. There's a lot behind that IP, but we can't necessarily do that with 1.5 million players. So we've struggled a little bit on the cost acquisition, buying players into a PC, non-Steam PC game, even with Epic Game Store support. It's been expensive. It's been way more than we make per player. So we had to kind of retool that a little bit. We did pull back the marketing a little bit, 6 months ago, and we've been really retooling that. How do we get that out in a faster and better way? And so you'll definitely be seeing more soon. But it's been our champion of first, right? It's been our it's what we became kind of known for. We are in love with all these characters, and we want to make sure the beauty of these kind of concepts of Web3 is whatever we do with that franchise, everybody comes along with the ride, right? everything every Blanko can come along with future endeavors. And that's one thing we're really excited about. So I think you're going to see a lot more about Blankos in the future. We want to kind of keep retooling that and making it stronger and stronger as an IP. So.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I love the Blankos IP. I have personally struggled a little bit with understanding. You said you've got the gameplay versus social challenges. I was kind of hinting at those with the question.
Yep.
And I appreciate you kind of owning it and being upfront about it, because that to me is probably the biggest issue I have with it is I love the IP. Honestly, I love the IP. It's so recognizable. You can absolutely build all kinds of products on top of that. On the gaming side, that's where I've had the hardest time. I'm just like, I'm not quite sure what to do with this as a gamer. So I wish you the best of luck building out that IP, because really it definitely deserves, and I'm not surprised to hear, by the way, that it has a life of its own. It is definitely one of those pretty iconic pieces of IP that, when treated right with the right vehicle, so to speak, I think that can really live on its own.
Yeah, we think the same thing. But I think, like I said, what we ended up with, we had an amazing build system. In fact, the build system, the creation in there was amazing. But, it was a challenge, right? We were kind of, we didn't want to bite off too much. We were trying to test a bunch of things. And, you could use that same build IP to build all types of 3D metaverse type spaces. You could use the same thing to build shooters. You could build the same thing to build races. When you put them all together, it gets hard. You end up with a lot of different conflicting personalities, right? You have some hardcore shooters that don't want to do races. You have races that don't understand how to do a shooter well. You have some people that just want to freaking chat in their avatars, with these Blankos. So yeah, we're definitely trying to kind of focus that. And I think that's the big lesson there. You can't ever set out to build Roblox. Roblox is a phenomenon. You can't plan to build Roblox. You have to kind of get there, right? And so I think for us, we definitely are going to keep reinvesting in IP, and we'll get some pretty awesome stuff out there very soon. We have a bunch of projects in work. So
yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. And that's actually a great, I don't know if this was designed this way or planned this way, but NFL Rivals arguably solves the IP problem by leaning on the NFL IP, right? Yes, of course, you got your own characters, you got your own art style. Of course you do, right? But it's almost, in my mind, it's almost the polar opposite of Blankos, where you've gone and you've built your own IP and these very recognizable characters, but didn't necessarily have the right vehicle, certainly from a gaming side, my perspective, to get there. Whereas with NFL Rivals, you've said, okay, or this is what it looks like from the outside in, at least. It's like, hey, we learned a whole bunch from Blankos. It's hard to build your own IP. Let's take the NFL IP or something similar, something as huge as that, and then build a great mobile gaming experience on top of that. That doesn't necessarily scream Web3, doesn't scream blockchain. You can play it as a Web2 experience without getting too hung up on wallets and the chain and all that kind of stuff, all the technology, the boring stuff that gamers don't really care about and shouldn't honestly care about. So tell us a little bit more. This is a very recent product. You launched it earlier this year. In the first couple of months, you did a great piece with Dean over at GamesBeat, where you talked about some of the metrics. I'd love to kind of get an update on some of those. Listeners, please go and read the Dean Takahashi piece in GamesBeat on NFL Rivals and how it's been doing. But you got 1 million installs in just a couple of months. You had some really strong sounding metrics early on. Tell us a little bit more about those and how it's holding up over the longer run.
Yeah, so a couple things opened up from Blankos into NFL. One was mobile, and mobile historically has a much cheaper cost of acquisition than PC. Yeah. So we're like, okay, that's interesting. We went pretty early to Apple and Google and kind of said, hey, here's what we want to build and here's what we want to do, and got kind of started that path of how do we put that out. We talked to a lot of the sports leagues, to be real honest. A couple of them came to us. We went to a couple of them and really kind of found the perfect fit with NFL. NFL, it's predominantly US, which can be a challenge on a global audience and to buy users. But it's the affinity of NFL consumers to that brand is remarkable, and it's really fun. So we kind of went in there. Now, obviously, we're going into a game space that has a pretty dominant player, right? I mean, Madden's been there for 34, 35 years. I mean, love those guys. EA Sports, we know a lot of that team, an amazing product. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to do something different, right? So one is, the way we kind of viewed the sports rights was there's kind of three main categories. One, you have simulation, which is, pretty much dominated by EA and Take-Two. And those, rightfully so. Those are hard games to make. They're expensive games to make. They're trying to recreate the sport completely down to the penalty, digitally. And there's some great, the animation systems, all the work that goes into those games is immense. So we didn't want to play that space. Like that's their space. Let's stay out of that. Then you have on the other side, you have kind of fantasy. In fantasy, you have So Rare's done a great job in fantasy, But that's not us. We wanted that interactivity. We wanted to have more agency, player agency than fantasy could offer, right? Fantasy is great because you can tap into some simpler mechanics, but it doesn't have that interactive piece. So our inspiration was, well, what if we kind of pulled a little from each, And then the idea there was there's been a genre of gaming that I think is frankly beloved by consumers. So we call it arcade team manager is what we're going after. But it's kind of that arcade style, right? A little bit to where it's like, NFL Blitz and NBA Jam and all of these games that have kind of in our past that we're so hooked on. We're like, let's go after that kind of area, and we'll pull, the player agency, or we'll pull the kind of player agency, the interactivity, to where you're actually calling plays and you're making moves and you're kicking field goals and all that. But let's kind of you can mix up your team. I can have my fantasy team and I can really put whoever I want on my lineup, right? And that now can drive into scarcity, and we can have real good concepts around, hey, I want to build the best team. I want to be the general manager to build the best team out there. And I'm going to trade and sell and play and all that type of stuff while I'm having to be good at the game. So I still have to be able to play the game to kind of fully move forward. So that was kind of our idea there. The NFL loved it. It took us a while to kind of get there and get with any of these leagues, you actually have two contracts, and there's very few companies that have both. So we have both the NFL contract as well as the Players Association contract. And you kind of, to what we are doing or what EA does, you have to have both. And so that took a little while. That was a challenge, but the game's done well, and we've been very, very proud of it. I think the two stats I'm most proud of so far, and the game's only been out about 60 days, which is great. Actually, maybe 60, 90 days at this point. We picked up 1 million players almost right off the bat, which was great. We're sitting nice growth. We're seeing tens and tens of thousands of players a day coming in, which is great. My favorite two stats, I think, in that game right now, one is that we're after, I think we have about 36 or 38,000 rating or reviews now on the App Store. We're sitting at a 4.8 out of 5, which is, up there with Madden. It's up there with FIFA. And I think that was one thing. We had a couple naysayers who are like, oh, you have, kind of these Web3 concepts behind it. You're going to get review bombed. It's just not going to work. And I think we've been able to blend those two worlds together perfectly to where, people are loving it. They're not complaining about sellable economies. So that's been a big, big moment for us, is that we are reviewed right where all of the big titles are right now. So that's been a big, big thing for us. The one I love the most, though, is I think on iOS, we're averaging nearly 2 hours of gameplay per player per day. And that blows my mind. We have people really playing that game. And that's on average right now, across all the players in the game. So we're very, very pumped about that. People are playing the game heavily, And now I think for us, it's opening up other opportunities now. We're going back to Apple. We're the number one sports game in May. We're the number one action game. We actually beat out Roblox in May in terms of the number one action game. It's going to allow us now, as we go into the actual season. We're still in the off season, which is great.
Yeah.
We launched the game during the off season. The game season starts next month, a month and a half from now. And, we're going to be ready for that September 7th. So we got some more functionality coming. We got some new features coming. And we've now been able to kind of see, how do we balance this kind of Web2 and Web3 economy together? There's some things, again, we're learning from, and we're trying to improve it fast. But it's a great start for us. We're really, really excited. And in fact, there's some interesting data on there too, to where, if you take a game, even like a FIFA, right, which is massive. And the other thing we love about NFL is it's the right number of audience, right? Madden is about 25 million players on Madden Mobile. We're closing in on 2. I think we'll be at 10 this year, maybe 12 this year. So we're at a really, really nice growth on that game. But then there's other sports out there. FIFA Mobile has 850 million installs, right? So there's definitely other bigger sports leagues, but we love the affinity of NFL and what we can prove out. But we're seeing great numbers. I think 15% of all of our revenue is coming from fees from the secondary already. And that's still with the marketplace outside of the game. Imagine what'll happen when we can get that marketplace in the game, right? So we think that this is going to be a great one. I think it's going to break open some things for the entire Web3 industry, right? In terms of how do you get it in the game? How does Apple and Google kind of want this to work within their ecosystems, which is a very important thing. And we've been very fortunate. We were just quoted, I think, a couple weeks ago with Google Play. We've kind of helped, partner with them and help define how do these new economies work, and how do we basically kind of open those policies up to do more projects like this.
Yeah, we had the So Rare guys actually on episode just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago now, and we'll talk about soccer, and Football Manager is my favorite game, which is soccer management. So
Yep.
obviously, football, soccer is the biggest game on the planet, and to your point, FIFA Mobile has 850 million versus
Yep.
25 million for Madden. So obviously, there's a lot of room for growth there. I think one of the interesting pieces that you're calling out here, I have two questions, or two follow-on questions for NFL Rivals. One
Yep.
is more about the Web3 angle. But first, I wanted to just pick on something you mentioned, which is, you've gotten yourself to about 2 million installs so far. It sounds like you're happy with the growth of tens of thousands per day, new installs coming in. That's great. Expect to get to about 10 million, 12 million, maybe later on this year. That would be awesome. So this is a two-part question. What is your UA strategy on this?
Yep.
And then, because UA on mobile, I agree with you, to something else you said earlier, is easier than for PC. That is true, cheaper. It is still very expensive these days, very saturated, especially post IDFA apocalypse, with Apple and so on. And we don't need to cover that on this episode, but it is definitely more challenging than it has been in the past. And then the second question, which is related, is how does the Web3 component unlock UA differently, if at all? I'm open to being, hearing that actually it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. But how does the Web3 component, and presumably the higher monetization, presumably the higher stickiness, engagement levels, correct me if I'm wrong here, how does that unlock different channels for UA or different LTVs that then allow you to be more aggressive?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I think fundamentally the cost of acquisition is, it's almost an order of magnitude different between PC and mobile, even in the post IDFA world, right? We're still, we're seeing great numbers. They've crept up a little bit again off season, so it's a little bit harder to find all that user base. We're not spending a ton yet on it. We're going to be turning the afterburners on with the season kickoff, which is great. But I think a couple things. One, big games like an NFL, hopefully you get some love from Apple and Google over time, and there's ways to get kind of in front of that audience. There are a lot more channels though, which is interesting. So, we were seeing nearly $40, $45 cost of acquisition on PC. It was that high after you get through the core, right? The core Web3 is great to come in. They support a lot of it. But if you really want to get to millions and millions of players, you're looking at that kind of range if you're not on Steam. Steam helps if you hit the algorithm right. Steam, though, without the algorithm, you're in the same challenge, right? So it's more limiting on what you can do with PC, right? We're spending most of our effort around, building that community or going after YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. Mobile has a lot more opportunities to kind of grow that, which is great. So we've been testing a lot. We're finding, things like TikTok and Reddit and other channels, Apple search ads, obviously, things like that are great ways to get in if it feels like Web2. If it goes to Web3, I think you close down that audience. So I think it in our case, we are marketing the game like a traditional mobile game. Where does that Web3 kick in? Well, like I said, we're seeing amazing ARPDAUs in that game. So that game is doing great. It's completely free to play, but I'd say we're competing with Madden, on ARPDAUs already. And we're only seeing about, we're seeing 10, 12 to 15%, let's say, of net revenue is coming from the secondary. That secondary is outside of the game. And we've been working very closely with the first parties of how do we bring that in the game? And how do we do it to where we can kind of play nice with everybody? And we're very close. So we actually think, right now, that could increase, we think that ARPDAUs on secondary could actually exceed ARPDAUs of primary, right? So how does that help you? Well, if as you know from mobile, literally, a small amount of LTV can be the difference of success or failure in mobile. It's gotten that, it's gotten that tight. So if we can suddenly have another 50% of revenue coming from secondary, and that secondary, it's not even people paying us, right? It's people paying other people, and we just get a little fee off of that for helping complete that transaction through the smart contracts. It makes a big difference. In fact, I think you could see. I think what you're going to see is a lot of is that data starts coming out more and more. And I think as we start getting to games that start hitting 10, 15, 20 million players, I think you're going to see many game developers that are like, they're almost going to be at a disadvantage, right? It's almost like you don't have that extra revenue stream, what do you do? And I think that's going to be really interesting for game developers over time. But what we're also seeing though is we see people come back and come back and come back. I mean, they start viewing it differently. In fact, a lot of the players don't realize that they can sell the items. A lot of them are literally just coming in, playing, building their team. And we're working on things like bidding. We're working on things with the in-game marketplace with Apple and Google, to where I think when you have players come in and you're like, wait a second, somebody just offered me money for Patrick Mahomes? Like, what does that mean, right? And it's the best way you could onboard somebody into Web3 is give them something that matters to them, right? Like, you mean I bought this, a couple months ago for $10 in a pack, and now I'm, now somebody's offering me $100 US for it. I'm going to figure out what that means, right? So we think that it becomes a really interesting piece of the puzzle. We think it becomes a very interesting piece of the monetization strategy, which ultimately leads to cost acquisition. I think what we're also excited about is it's starting to lead to new gameplay pretty heavily, and that makes it fun. There's new meta loops within these games. Nitro Nation we can talk about in a minute, but we actually are working on some really cool pieces to where it's a gameplay model you couldn't pull off without Web3, right? And that's when people really start to take notice.
Yeah, and I think something you said resonates very strongly with me. I do think that at some point Web3, when it's done best, it's almost invisible. But then there's that aha moment, not just for developers like ourselves, where it's like something clicks, like we talked about earlier on, but it clicks for the players too, right? And I'm first and foremost, I'm having fun. I'm playing this game. I'm not playing to earn. I think that meta has, lived past its useful life, certainly at this point. But I do think that when somebody realizes like, oh, okay, the effort I put into this game that I enjoy anyway is actually worth something to somebody else who also enjoys this game, but happens to be more cash rich, but time poor than I am. I think that unlocks something incredibly interesting. We're not there yet, anywhere near there yet. But once we get there, that is going to unlock much higher LTVs. And that is actually, to your point, going to be interesting to see what does that do to overall LTVs in the ecosystem, and what does that do to the competitiveness of more air quotes traditional developers who don't necessarily have that unlock. They may have very highly monetizing games, of course they do, because presumably that's why they're leading the pack and able to do UA at scale. But they don't necessarily have that like extra layer of whales in their games that are contributing at levels not seen in traditional Web 2. So I think that's a really interesting point. I'm not really asking for, it's not a question, it's more of an observation, but that's something that I've been noodling on quite a bit, which is once you start to get those Web 3 components building into more traditional gameplay, that's going to be a very interesting moment for every developer to take note of, because it is going to impact LTVs and it's going to impact UA budgets, especially as Apple and Google become more and more, not lenient, I think that's the wrong word, but are more accepting of different kinds of gameplay and different kinds of economies, which we're definitely seeing. Okay. I want to talk about Nitro Nation because I think that's, again, another example of you guys leaning into a different genre. You're working, it sounds like, with a partner out of Estonia who's done a whole bunch of these games, knows how to make the gameplay. So you're reducing the risk on that front, certainly on the design risk side of things. How are you integrating Web3 there? How are you working with these third-party developers? Tell us more about these kinds of relationships and how you're going to do more of them.
Yeah, so Nitro Nation's been another project we've been working on for a while. We had a group called CM Games, and CM Games they're an amazing studio. They've had, like I said, a bunch of different titles, but a bunch of racing titles. So they've had a lifelong history in that. Vlad and team are great. They got the concept right away, and they kind of quickly saw, okay, we see how this could work. Right. So what's great about that, we kind of worked with them. We have a kind of a new version called Nitro Nation World Tour. It's actually in beta, kind of a closed beta today, and actually it'll start hitting availability next week, most likely with in the app stores. And what's exciting about that is that we've done a couple things. One, we've really worked with them to really up the graphical quality. I don't want to kind of pat ourselves on the back, but I think between our two companies, I think we have one of the best looking mobile racing games that has been made, right? And I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but we put a lot of effort into really making these things look gorgeous, right? So we're excited about that. I think we have 200 car models licensed already. And we've done something a little different. Like we've gone into all those car manufacturers and we've really worked with them to allow us to customize these cars, right? So the players can come in and it's not just racing it, but I own that item. I can really come in and customize heavily. Not only can I physically customize them, but I can actually go back and tune them, right? I can tune the gearbox ratios. I can tune the nitrous oxide tanks. I can tune everything. So you almost have a couple roles now in this game, right? You have like racer, you have mechanic, and we think there'll become some interesting social opportunities over time to where maybe one person's not good at all three, or whatever. We have another concept in the game. We have a thing called workshops, and those are actually on sale now. So there are an NFT behind the scenes, but workshops become part of the whole social system. So if I need to get my car painted, I need to get my car upgraded, you have to go to a workshop and somebody owns that workshop, right? So you can even start banding those workshops together to almost create these little mini cities, you know? You can rent out cars, you can lease cars, you can paint cars, you can customize, you can tune them, all that type of stuff through the economics that the players are now kind of integral in. So we think a lot of depth in this game. We think it's going to be a really cool opportunity. Like I said, we have hundreds and hundreds of cars licensed now at this point. The team's working on, hundreds more. And not only that, we actually have, one thing we have is we have our own kind of fictitious aftermarket company in the game called Doc 75, a Seattle-based car manufacturer or car modifier. And Doc 75 can even add parts to a lot of these cars now too. So kind of almost unlimited design space, very, very strong social mechanics. And the players are, kind of in on that gameplay. They're in on the economy that's building within this game, right? They're figuring out how to kind of be part of that. So really, really pumped. We also took a pretty interesting design element. The creative team at Activision, they really focused on almost called it like NASCAR versus, well, it was drag racing, but like drag racing meets music festivals. So you'll see a lot of that pop culture coming through this game. There'll be contents that take place around these different festivals around the world. So again, just really, really tons of content and an economy that players can pretty much go as deep as they want on both the customization and participation. So pumped about where this goes. We think the racing genre is perfect for these Web3 economies. Same thing with sports. So we have high hopes for this one. We think it's going to be amazing. And again, we're almost out the door. We've been in soft launch in the Philippines and Mexico for a couple months now. We're opening it up to kind of everybody that's bought kind of one of these NFTs or one of these assets in the past can come into the game. I think it's later today. And then we'll start having that availability very, very soon here. So
awesome. Well, good luck with the launch. I don't want to dig in. Obviously, maybe we can have you back actually once Nitro Nations is out there.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear a little bit about kind of your approach to working with third parties. The NFL Rival sounds like it was an acquisition almost, or an acqui-hire of bringing the team in-house, and it was a third-party team, then became a first-party team. You've got a couple of these. You have another title as well in the works with another developer partner, I think, and maybe even another one. You tell me, you know this better than I do. Obviously, I'm just going based on public information. But what is the relationship with these third-party developers? What do the economics look like? As much as you can share, would love to hear more about what that means for you and what that means for the developers as you work together on these projects.
Yeah, and I think what we've wanted to do is we wanted to either be kind of the developer of record, so to speak, or working very, very tightly with studios that get it. I think that was the important part. So we didn't kind of spin too many wheels around, well, what do you mean this works this way, right? Like we wanted to make sure we were very, very tight around that. So we kind of divide the world, I'd say, and it's not just us, the industry, I think in general, first, second, and third party titles, right? First party, we're the developer, we own the IP, we're part of that whole thing, right? So, and generally either we would build it ourselves with a small team or we would actually outsource, almost like a work for hire type project. So Blankos was actually a work for hire. We own that IP. We had a great relationship with the studio. The studio is actually a former Activision team. So we knew that team incredibly, incredibly well. We didn't just go pitch them. It's like we'd known them for 10 years. And so they were basically looking for projects. We were wanting to build Blankos together, and it's been a great relationship there. So that's kind of what, we own the IP. We were building the game with them. We did more of the economy tech. We did all the back end, obviously. We did a lot of the production. And then we actually had a team that was actually working on the client. At Nitro Nation, Vlad and his team they're just great studio. And they got it right away. So we're like, okay, cool. They own the IP, but we're kind of partnering together. We're publishing that game and we're working on a lot of those elements together. So that's been great on that one. We've had other teams that we've just kind of we know we're going to make this game and we find the right team to kind of build that out. I think one of the things, it's a good and bad thing in our industry is there is some turnover, right? Studios go out of business, studios change. There was a sports related studio that recently kind of went out of business. And we grabbed a lot of that team too. Like we were like, hey, let's come on in, let's do something, did something here. So, I think that's one of the big advantages of being in the industry so long is it's a pretty small studio or a pretty small industry at the end of the day. We all go to the same events. We've all worked on different projects before. It seems like in some capacity. So we try and keep a pretty good eye on who's out there right now and what that means. And I think that's how we get a lot of our deals right now is we kind of come up with here's a genre, here's a leverage point that we think would help us have an advantage to bring the game out as a studio model. and then let's go find that team that really believes in it, understands it, and wants to really kind of change the world, right? And I think that's the key. Our focus eventually is we do want to open up all of our tools as a platform, and then be like, let other people build on it. We haven't fully done that, partly because we didn't think the playbook was solid enough. We felt like if we open up all the APIs and people can just come build, we were worried that too many people would fail, on it, because it's just, there's not a good playbook. There's not that build something that looks like this, which is how a lot of the industry is done, right? I want Clash of Clans meets this. We think that's we didn't have that playbook yet, but I think we're getting there quickly to where we will be able to open up a lot of the tool set. And I think you'll see us get a little bit more on that platform side over time. But right now we definitely cherry pick, we get a lot of proposals. We've thrown away a lot of games too. I think we've canceled as many games as we put out. So at this point, we just like any studio, we're looking for something we can have some type of leverage. Because I think our goal right now is we don't want to put out a game that has less than 10 million player opportunity. I think that's kind of our threshold. Like if we think the game can get to 10 million, that's great. We think at least 5 years. We think a 5-year longevity is the minimum that we'd want to go after. If we can't hit those two targets, we'll kind of toss the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Got to have a criteria. Okay, I know we're low on time, so I got a couple more questions I want to do quick fire on, if that's okay. The Myth token. Talk to me. What does the Myth token do? What's the purpose? You alluded a little bit at the start of this podcast to the fact that it's kind of decentralized and it's not necessarily something you are actively working on yourself, but you did put it into motion, I presume. Yeah. So tell us more about the Myth token. What does it do? What's its purpose?
Yeah, so our view on tokens is we don't really necessarily believe in single game tokens that are tradable, right? Like we don't think that's interesting. Any supply and demand in a game, games are not backed by military, they're not backed by oil reserves, right? They're supply and demand. So we think that any single game marketable token is probably not right for us. But we do believe in an ecosystem token, and we believe, or a portfolio token, let's call it, and we definitely believe in an ecosystem token. And we're already seeing some of that happen. We're seeing where if you have a unit of exchange that is built through a marketplace and you can sell from one game and buy into another game, we think that's a very powerful mechanism. And eventually, if you can sell from one game from one company and buy into another game in another company, that's even more interesting. So that was kind of the partly behind that. We also we liked the ideas of a token with governance reasons, for security reasons, for backing the chain reasons, all that type of stuff, which is why we helped kind of get the Mythos Foundation off the ground. It was built to be decentralized, it's a separate organization. We just wanted to help get it off the ground and get it circulated out there. So we do the Mythos token as part of the Mythos Foundation. We have adopted that token for our chain, for our marketplace. It will be the base unit of currency for everything we do. It's a fixed supply token. Not a lot of bells and whistles. Never really been marketed. That hasn't been the goal. And never did a real public sale or all those ICOs or any of that. We just started using it, and we're starting to build a lot of interesting utility against that already.
Awesome. I think, and just to clarify, you are planning that as a kind of a single token for the entire ecosystem. You're not thinking of like the whole dual token economy piece that was all the vogue, a couple of years ago with a governance token and an inflationary token. You're not planning individual tokens for individual game economies that might be interchangeable with each other. It's just, this is the token, at least as of now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say as of now, that it'll be the only tradable token, like externally central listed token we probably will be part of. We are experimenting with localized kind of wrapped tokens that are only locked within our ecosystem, right? So you never be able to take a Nitro token. You might be able to take a Nitro token and exchange it with NFL token, but you wouldn't Nitro token would never be listed on an exchange. NFL would never be listed on an exchange, but it would be backed by that Mythos token, right? So you could exchange in and out of that token, not traded on their own. So it'll never be its own kind of market cap that you're tracking on Binance, right? It's just, but we do believe that there could be local tokens as long as it's backed by an ecosystem token.
That makes total sense. Understood. Okay, great. Second quick fire question. So obviously you've raised a lot of venture funding. By my count, or at least by public accounts, about 300 million total. Most recently, 37 million Series C extension. It is great to be well capitalized. I'm sure you will agree with that. Obviously, with a lot of funding come very high expectations for outcomes and venture-sized outcomes. So just the obvious question here, how are you going to hit those expectations? What are your plans for the funding, and how are you going to get to that expectation level that I'm sure is part of these conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think right now I think we're mostly known for this kind of the couple games that are out, and the chain and the marketplace tech. That's our primary focus right now. So that's where we put a lot of funding into that. we help you get the foundation off the ground. I mean, we think there's a lot of great things happening. A couple things on that too is that, we've actually been pretty focused on trying to get to a break even or profitable state. I think we're getting there very quickly, which is great. I'd say either end of year or Q1, we think we'll be in a break even position, which is awesome. And a break even position on a very healthy, we're already doing about, we're doing about 40 million a month in sales already. So we're
Nice.
going $40 million are going through the products on a monthly basis, which is a great place to be at right now. We want to get that net revenue now kind of to the levels that we can break even the entire company. And that's been a key focus of ours. We actually have another couple of products that we've been thinking about. We kind of think, we've been kind of calling it recently. We've been focused very much on what we call Web3 now. We have a streaming company we acquired called Polystream back at the end of 2021. Very, very interesting cloud gaming tech. Very unique. Only one in the world that has this. We bought that company and I have all those patents. I'd say so that it's a very interesting way of how you do cloud gaming. We can do it at a fraction of a cost of what Stadia or xCloud or any of the other ones can do. So to me, we're now kind of calling that Web 3D, right? So it's kind of like you start off with the Web 3, that becomes digital identity, assets marketplace, and then you start getting new forms of how you distribute games, how do you watch games, and if you can start instantly getting into games with these economies that start moving you through those, it starts getting really fascinating. And we just started showing off a demo. We haven't publicly, officially showed it. We showed it at a conference and somebody put it up on Twitter already. But basically, we have a demo of this tech. We call it the HTTP of the metaverse, to where we have a demo to where we can stream 2 games, right? And so we're streaming Blankos, which is a Unity game. And in that, suddenly a portal opens, almost Doctor Strange style. And you can actually see an Unreal 4 game running live inside of Unity. And if I walk through that portal, you instantly take control of the other game with no latency at all. So you can literally move from one game engine to one game into another game engine to another game. So we actually think there's some really interesting things there, and that'll probably be our next kind of formal product. We're very close to getting our first couple of clients signed. I think you'll probably see a client live in the next, by the end of the year on this new tech. And for us, it's the next step, right? It changes distribution. It changes how games can be kind of interacting with other games, things like that. And then that core root is Web3 behind the scenes. So definitely focused a lot on that. I think there's even one other product we'd love to bring out in the next few years. So I think right now, we as Mythical, we have easily a 5-year roadmap of where we want to be. We have the core team kind of behind it. Our goal is break even on the first product, and then products 2 and 3 we can start investing in heavier as we grow. But they're all pretty complementary products over time. And our goal, again, we're trying to build next generation gaming. So that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do at Mythical.
Love it. And then final question. I know we're out of time here, so I'll make this really quick. Fast forward 5 years from now. What does success look like for Mythical? For
Mythical, for the industry, for Mythical?
Well, both.
Both.
Yeah, mythical to start with.
Yeah,
and then industry beyond that.
Yeah, I think we're about to see. I'm going to start of the industry, and I'll kind of play into that industry. So I think the industry is going to go through a massive amount of change over the next 10 years. I think it's going to be the most exciting. I've been in it for over a decade. I think the next decade of gaming is going to be really, really interesting, because I think we're going to see what the definition of what is a game and what is entertainment and interactive entertainment is going to really blend. And things like we're seeing with AI, I think we'll start seeing that the velocity, the rapid velocity we've seen on AI over the last 18 months. I think we're going to see that in gaming as well. And we're going to see new worlds, new creations, new ways to interact, new ways to be part of that, new ways to be entrepreneurial in that. I think that creator economy meets entertainment meets gaming will blend in a big way. And I think ultimately we kind of end up with a 3D internet over time, right? So people call it metaverse. I hate the word metaverse just because everybody has a definition for it. So I'm going to use the word 3D internet. I think we head to a 3D internet, right? And that's just going to change a lot of really cool stuff, how I interact, how I move. So I think that's where the industry is going. I think we're going to see just the proliferation of AI, but I think blockchain is as important to AI too, right? Because it's the ledger, right? It says who's what and who owns what and where is the digital supply chain. So I think we're going to see a huge, huge opportunity around that. And I think we'll see the industry grow even faster than what is being predicted out there. Where does Mythical fit in? I think we really want to position ourselves as that next generation kind of thinker and provider, right? And so I think we're thinking about things about what does streaming mean? And how do you, if you can jump from a live stream, if you can jump from watching a game into immediately playing the game because they're both streamed, right? You start shifting a lot of dynamics around games. And if you can suddenly move items down the road, right, or you can track across, and so all this stuff I think comes together very naturally over time. Whether your identity, your assets, your wallet, your ability to move between devices, and all that type of stuff becomes just second nature. And I think we'll see what is entertainment will be redefined a little bit. So we want to be that. We want to be that provider. We want to focus on a lot of those core tools, and we want to get that out into other companies so that we can really start seeing these progressions happen.
Love it. Love the vision. I know we're over time here, so I just want to respect that and kind of wrap this up here. So I just want to say a huge thank you, John, for coming on the pod. It has been incredible to hear about your vision for Mythical. It has also been a real pleasure chatting with you. Your energy is infectious. And so welcome back anytime. I would love to hear how things are going with Nitro Nations and the token and anything else that you guys have going on. So welcome back anytime.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah. And a big thank you, of course, as always, to all of our listeners. We'll be back next week with more interviews, more insights, and more analysis from the weird and wonderful world of Web3 and gaming more broadly. So until next time, friends, stay crypto curious and feel free to send questions, guest recommendations, and comments to me. My email is niko@naavik.co, and you can always find me on Twitter, or I believe it's X these days, at Niko the Fin. DMs are always open.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.